podcast, because if you forgot how good this team is during the regular season, it means you're just not listening to me, buddy. Like, I'm always ranting and raving about how awesome this team is. I could not be more excited to actually see this team take off, especially because you look at the Eastern Conference and, man, the top of the East, it's a little shaky. You have, Stars talking about, the pressure of the season and whether or not they want to stay there, dysfunction all around. And the Cavs are one of those teams that actually has continuity. They've brought in some guys that make a lot of sense. A guy like Max Strus that has played in a similar offensive system, playing off of a big man like Bam. Like, I'm just excited to see how all this goes. And the good news for fans is that the NBA has announced a new player participation policy, basically to kind of curb some of the resting that we're seeing, especially in big matchups, but in particular, the resting for star players, which the Cavs have 3 players that meet that criteria. The criteria is that a player has to have been named to an All-Star or an All-NBA team in the last 3 years. That means obviously Darius Garland, Jared Allen, and Donovan Mitchell would qualify for that. Some of the other kind of notes from the NBA's press release is that the player participation policy, it's meant to manage its roster to ensure no more than one star player is unavailable for the same game. So if you are going resting, you got to get a little creative there. Ensure that star players are available for all national television and all NBA in-season tournament games. Maintain a balance between the number of one-game absences for star players in home and road games. Refrain from any long-term shutdowns in which a star player stops playing games. If resting a healthy player, ensure that the player is present at the games and visible to fans. The policy also includes.
Me laugh.
Yeah, that one made me laugh. The long-term shutdowns is very clearly like to kind of limit the end of season tanking kind of thing, where certain players that Damian Lillard comes to mind in Portland, where there were questions about whether or not he was healthy at the end of the year. And the last kind of note is that the policy includes exemptions for injuries, personal reasons, and pre-approved back-to-back restrictions based on a player's age, career workload, or serious injury history. Carter, what were your thoughts when you saw this kind of come down for the league?
Well, I'll tell you what, Justin, it's really going to help with continuity over the course of the regular season, which isn't something I can say for this podcast because we got stuck on the going live screen, and I believe I didn't believe we were like 3 minutes in before anyone could see what was happening. So listen to the audio, guys. I'm not going to fix this later. But we got all the way through your opening spiel. We just missed like our banter at the beginning. It's not a problem. I think it's a little bit of a bummer that we have to have a player participation policy, but also I think it's probably if I have a gripe, it's with the name. It almost implies the players are the ones who are wanting to sit, and by all reports, it kind of seems to be team training staffs and a lot of this a lot of the medicals behind load management that has in most cases star players sitting and not overly taxing their bodies on these four games and 5-night stretches. I think that was evidenced by the fines being directed at the teams, right? Like, it's not the players that are going to be fined in these instances. It's going to be levied against the teams. Yeah, absolutely. So I think ultimately I think it's going to, no matter the optics of it, I think the end outcome is we're going to see more star players playing basketball games. And who can complain, it seems to be loose enough where it's like, hey, if you're Kawhi Leonard, you kind of always have a knee injury from now on. Like you always have that, some of these stars who have had these kind of catastrophic injuries, yeah, it's always going to, be a little, you talk to any athlete who's had one of those, they always kind of feel it. I think it's loosey-goosey enough to protect players who, legitimately really need the rest, as opposed to guy feels fine, team feels fine, guy still sits anyway. Getting rid of those, if that's all this policy does, then great. It worked. And it kind of feels like a can't hurt type of thing for me. if there's a little more pressure on players to play and for players to, show up to the game. And, I do like the show up, even if you're sitting, like, so fans can say, I saw John Moran, I saw Darius Garland, I saw, Zion Williamson, whoever these stars are. It's
Did I ever tell you about my first NBA game that I attended live?
I believe you have, but go ahead and tell the audience.
Yeah, it was Minnesota. They were playing against Detroit, and we showed up, and Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, and Rasheed Wallace, I think even Ben Wallace, all sat for that game. So it did go to overtime. That was a lot of fun. Tayshaun Prince had a great game, but a little bit disappointing. But at least Sheed was kind of walking around pregame, working out with Amir Johnson, all those guys saying hi to the fans. So that part was nice. But I was just excited to see NBA basketball at that point. But I think looking back now, having gone to a few live games, that would probably disappoint the living hell out of me. One of those late season games.
And I know that it sounds a little trite when people say, when people talk about the family that scrounges up to go to their one game a year, but there's a lot of those families, man. There's a lot of people who want to see their favorite players play, and if the league, it doesn't seem like the league or the players are particularly interested in cutting games off the schedule and losing all that revenue. So if you've got a problem, this is one thing I think the Adam Silver era really gets a lot of credit for, is when there is a problem, when the science or the analytics have said, do this thing that isn't all that fun to watch. I think the Silver era has mostly done a good job of reacting to that. David Stern didn't have to deal with take fouls in transition because no one was doing them yet. But this is we're in the Moneyball era in every sports league, and every sports league can either just get less fun to watch while teams exploit things for advantages at the expense of the entertainment value, or they can do what baseball did and implement a pitch clock, or you can do what football did and open up some make the rules a little tilted towards the offense, so we're not just having wide receivers just getting decapitated midfield. In basketball, it's stuff like take fouls and making sure players aren't being load managed out of a fun night out for a family. I think that in some ways, and I think we've had plenty of criticisms for some things that Silver has done. It's not like we have 100% approval rating here, but I do think we kind of forget that their jobs are just getting harder every time, because commissioners' jobs are getting harder all the time because there's just so many more exploits. I always joke that no one, when they wrote the first set of NFL football rules or basketball rules, was accounting for the idea that the offensive player might be trying to trick the official. There's no one ever considered that when they were making these games up in the backyard. So I think it's a tremendously hard job. The optics of it are a little weird, but whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, I think this is a lot about changing the narrative. And I do think one of the things you consistently hear is that it's teams that are making these decisions. Players want to play, and I think they want to change that perception. And having stars play for national TV games, that matters. The TNT guys, like Kenny, Chuck, all those guys, those are probably the only times that they watch a lot of these teams play. So if the stars are resting, guess what they're going to be talking about at halftime? They're going to be complaining about that. You look at ESPN changing up the broadcast crew and getting rid of I know you have a soft spot for Van Gundy, but a lot of times it didn't sound like he was enjoying what he was watching. And I think a lot of this is about, kind of changing the narrative there. I will say, as people become more aware that it's the teams making this decision, the teams are also in a really tough spot as well, because, you're put in these spots where you are playing 4 games in 5 nights, multiple cities. There's big time wear and tear on these athletes. They're coming into the league with more wear and tear on their bodies than ever before. You watch a game from the 2000s, and if you go even further back, there is just so little movement off ball, right? Compared to nowadays. Nowadays, every single player is involved in every single offensive set. There's so much movement. There's so much, the guys are bigger, faster, stronger. There's more chance at collisions or stepping the wrong way. So you're going to have those injuries. So the big thing that I would still like to see, I would love to trim some of the preseason out. I'd like to get creative with, playing those 2 games in the same city, those type of things to mitigate rest, to mitigate travel, to make these decisions easier, because I think at the end of the day, teams would rather have guys play. Like I think if you're the Cavs and you're on the coaching staff trying to plan rest days and stuff like that, you would rather be playing your guys and not be put in a situation where rest is necessary. Players would rather be playing. So, making it more feasible for them, eliminating some of the travel, making it easier so that the rest isn't required, I think would be another step in a positive direction. But I think overall, this is giving the fans what they want to see, which is the star players out there. And I think the NBA's got a really great product. So the more times that you're out there showcasing it, the better it is for the health and the growth of the league.
Yeah, stick with me while I try to land the plane on this take here that I'm formulating in real time. But we spent a lot of time talking about like the rings culture impact on fans, and how it's title or bust, or the player's a loser on players where they're like, I gotta get to a place where I can win a title, because I'm going to not be remembered well if I'm the guy who never got there. We don't spend a lot of time talking about how that has impacted teams and team building. And I wonder if in, maybe even just 15, 20 years ago, if teams would ever do that, if they would ever say, yeah, we're going to actively make our product a little worse during the regular season, like pretty often, like 10, 15 times, 10 to 15 out of 82 is quite a few times.
Yep.
To make that choice. And we're going to increase our chances of losing on the day, because the only thing our organization cares about is getting to a title contention. Like, I wonder how much that has kind of ended up impacting the way these organizations run, because I feel like across the board, even for organizations, it's less okay to be a grit and grind Memphis Grizzlies team. Like, no one's aspiring to that right now. Maybe unless the team's just been bad for a really long time, like the Kings, I think maybe you could talk to that franchise into feeling that way, but almost everyone else is like, I gotta find championship level players. I have to maintain. If I find them, I gotta keep them healthy. I gotta make sure that they are perfectly primed to be hitting their peak in the postseason. Like, there's just I can't imagine that hasn't had an impact on how organizations operate.
I think you landed the plane, Carter.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
I think that's a really smart point, and and the investments, right? Like, it's going up and up, right? Player contracts are going up. The terms on them are shorter than it was in the past, right? Like, when you have guys locked up on a 7-year deal, you feel good about like the long-term health of the partnership. You have a serious injury now when a guy's got 2 years left on his deal and you miss a season, that could impact your entire team building philosophy. That can, put a big sense of urgency or waste a prime title contention year. So making sure these guys are as healthy as possible obviously ends up being a big priority. So overall, I think it's good. I still think that there's steps you could take in the right direction to make it easier for teams and players, but I think this is overall positive. We do have some Cavs news for you, Carter. We got signings. Training camp deals have been signed for Sharif Cooper, Pete Nance, Justin Powell. So Sharif and Pete, obviously, we saw them Summer League champions with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Justin Powell, another good shooter. I think that the thing you can notice with basically all Cavs signings lately have been guys with shooting talent. There has been one other signing that I saw, Mike Scotto, who very reputable. Mike does terrific work. He reported that Zaire Smith has been signed to an Exhibit 10 deal, although that hasn't been confirmed by the team, but that is something that's out there. Apparently he got that from Zaire's agent, so that's interesting. Do you have any takes on these signings? Like, the first thing that jumped out to me is we're going to be watching Cleveland Charge games as a family this year, because I assume a lot of this is to keep the rights for these guys, and when you already factor in, Craig Porter Jr., Monty Bates, Isaiah Mobley, this is going to be a lot of fun. We might have a Nance on the team, buddy.
Yeah, that would be really dope, obviously. And I love to see Nance and Cooper on the team, just because we talk a lot about summer league and how it doesn't really matter, and it's not that predictive, but like you want to reward people who play well for you and who do their jobs at a high level. And like Cooper hasn't had that NBA shot since he left Atlanta, but he's been such a great citizen for this Cavs franchise writ large. Playing for the Charge, playing for the Cavs summer league team, and it's cool to see him rewarded. Pete, I thought Pete Nance showed a lot in summer league. He's a big guy, big frame. The jumper went in at a reasonable clip. He doesn't have quite the touch that is Big Brother did. At the same age.
I would disagree with that. I think he's got more shooting touch.
No. I'm sorry. I just said the wrong sentence. He doesn't have the finishing touch that that his brother did. Missed a few bunnies around the rim. Then where you go, man. If you're flushing those or you're finishing in transition, then all of a sudden, like your prospects look a lot better. But
Larry's ruining people's days on those plays.
Yes. So, like, I think ultimately what you want for your G League team are either guys that you think might get up to the next level or guys that are going to be great citizens for you, push the players that you have down there, help you win some games, and, work on their own games and try to get an opportunity, whether it's with the Cavs or elsewhere. And I think that Cooper and Nance certainly check that box. Powell, not familiar with this game. A red-headed shooter. Cavs always need one. So
needed to replace one on the Charge.
Yeah. So it must happen. And then Zaire Smith is an interesting one. Obviously that's a guy who was thought really, really highly of going into the draft. I mean, no one loves to. It's a bummer for him that he was the guy the Sixers traded Mikal Bridges for. They traded down in the draft and picked up Zaire Smith, and the Suns were able to reap the benefits, and now the Nets are reaping the benefits of Mikal Bridges. But like,
one of those lessons that this is not the NFL, and trading down in the draft is never the move. Like
very rarely.
You look at the Pelicans, getting Jackson Hayes and
just want one more look at it
instead of Darius Garland. Oof, that's tough.
That's not what you like to see. So I think that, but you look at his career and he had like a horrible like season-ending illness, like just like a really raw deal. So he's still a really young guy. Hope he can show something. Hope he can latch on. Like when you get to this set of the roster, especially with a Cavs roster that is quite set, they don't have a lot of openings, even at the two-way level. You kind of just hope these guys impress and find themselves a job, whether it's with the Cleveland Charge or best case for any of them is with a big league club. And I think at this level, at this part of the roster, I think you're rooting for the guy more than the franchise in a weird way. Yeah. So like if Sharif Cooper leaves training camp with a full-time deal with an NBA team, awesome. Yeah. Good for him.
Or even a two-way spot, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like that's I would root for that for these guys, especially since we don't have any openings right now on the main club. We obviously have that one roster spot, but kind of looks like that's going to stay open for cap maneuvering reasons. So yeah, I'm excited. And frankly, it'll just be nice to like have that continuity. You're not like throwing a bunch of randos in there trying to learn some of your key sets. Like these guys also got to help the main guys get ready through camp. That's their other job. And the fact that Pete Nance and Sharif Cooper are probably just going to be able to like slot right in comfortably, there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah, and even from a player development standpoint, right? Like the fact that the Charge coaching staff is going to have a lot of familiar faces there. They're going to have all those reps they had together in Vegas. Like that's really important for player development when you're not figuring out, fit, and you can just focus on skill development. You can just focus on developing your game within the context of the team. And I completely agree with you. Like I'm always rooting for these guys as individuals, because I think ultimately it's a feather in the cap for the team, right? Like if you provide opportunities to guys and they develop and they get contracts elsewhere, or even when we looked at like Darius Garland signing the extension, and there's the opportunity, if he would have made all NBA last year, that would have kicked to another tier. I'm not rooting for him to miss out on that because, that's going to help the Cavs' financial flexibility. I'm rooting for all of these guys to maximize their own individual earnings, their own potential. And if that forces the Cavs to get more creative because these guys have been awesome, that's the job of the front office. They can figure that out.
Awesome problem to have.
Awesome problem to have. I want to see these guys do well, and I'm really excited. Like I want these guys to exceed my expectations. Like I want Bates to make it so that, hey, we have to actually consider, later in the seasons, he's way more ahead of schedule than we thought, and this is a big wing that can provide shooting. Like if that's a problem we have to cross, which I personally don't expect it to be a problem this season, but if he forces the conversation there and gets consideration, that would be great. I want to have these problems.
Justin, brief soapbox. NBA 2K. Why do I not have Amani Bates and Craig Porter Jr.
Oh
in
my
the
goodness.
game?
I haven't even downloaded it yet.
It's so disappointing. I was really excited to play with those guys, especially with like I was gonna kind of maybe do a little nerd remake a few of the guys on the G League team that aren't in the game as well. But like without, kind of like, come on, at least get all the two-way guys in. They're all signed. What are we doing?
Carter, the word on the street is that the game has really fallen off since you and I are no longer in the game.
Are we officially out?
I think we were out last year. I think we were only on for 3 years.
No, we were in longer than that. We were in the game
really?
for a minute. Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I still had my like Twitter profile picture from like 7 years ago. In the game.
There you
go. Yeah. Shout KJ at Blue Wire. Best product placement we've ever had. But yeah, great. Having a lot of fun with 2K this year, Justin. I can make jump shots again. It's really nice.
Oh man, I haven't even downloaded it yet, and I'm a sicko. I get those disgusting stats in 2K, so maybe I'm going to need to do that after this podcast. But it's always a good time. I want Bates in there. That would be a lot of fun.
Bates and Porter, come on, dude. We only have Isaiah because he was on the roster last year.
It's funny because obviously the focus of this season is going to be about the Cavs taking that next step to see if they can get into championship contention. But we might legitimately have to have like charge episodes or charge segments, charge interviews, because there is so many reasons to care about that team. It really does feel like kind of a minor league feeder system, and that's exciting because that's where you want the G League to be for these NBA teams.
Yeah, and you look at some other franchises who have done really well with that. The Bucks use the Herd really well. I believe the Heat use their G League affiliate a ton to find some of their diamonds in the rough. And that's, as we've said, as the Cavs empty their coffers in the Donovan Mitchell trade and used a lot of their flexibility they had remaining to add Strus and Niang. Like, as you are a good team year after year after year, especially without draft picks to kind of replenish, you got to find guys on the margins. I think the Cavs are doing a really nice job, turning over all those stones to try to do that.
I completely agree. And, it may not be a diamond in the rough, but we have an absolute gem when it comes to the support we receive from Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Carter, I'm going to let you kind of take the wheel here because we had this on the rundown for last episode, and I really want this back half of the podcast to be focused on your topic here because I think there's a lot of meat on the bone here, and I'll let you ask me the question. So go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, so like last episode, back half, we kind of spent a lot of time talking about the Cavs offense, the way it was going to work, the tweaks JB was going to put in, how the spacing would affect the sets they already ran. And for this one, I really wanted to talk about the defense because I have some big questions about this Cavaliers defense. And I'm going to start with the biggest one, Justin. The Cavaliers will be playing in their in the top 7 of their rotation. They're going to be playing Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell. They're going to be playing Karis LeVert, They're going to be playing Max Strus. They're going to be playing George Niang. Like the only two defenders that will be playing like that I expect to be in that top 7 are the two bigs and Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, the two guys who are known for their defense. And you might say, well, Isaac Okoro is that 8th guy, but I would say he played a ton of minutes for them last year. He was a really important rotation player en route to that top defense in the NBA. And my question, Justin, is with this infusion of shooting and spacing and offensive specialization, are the Cavs still a, quote, defensive team? Is that their identity still going into the year?
I think it still needs to be kind of the core anchor and the thing that you hang your hat on. I think you want to improve as an offensive team. I think you want to continue to take those defensive stops and translate that into transition opportunities and offense on the other end, going from kind of that 16th team in transition frequency and upping that. They're like, the Cavs go from, 17, 18th to top 10 in transition frequency off of those stops. That'd be great. I think that is something that's a realistic goal, especially when you have these jump shooters that like to pull up in transition. And hopefully you see more growth there from Darius. But I do still think that it needs to start on the defensive end. And I'm going to push back a little bit, Carter, because if you're talking minute distribution, I do think that Isaac Okoro needs to be that 7th over George Niang. I think Isaac Okoro needs to play more minutes than George Niang. And when you talk about maintaining the defensive identity of this team, it's tough because obviously Max Strus is not bringing what Isaac Okoro brings to the table on the defensive end. I think he's good positionally. He's strong. He's able to defend multiple positions. That's something that Miami used a lot. But he played 28 minutes per game last year for Miami. And if we're assuming that that's going to hold steady, that's 8 minutes per game more than Cedi Osman. I think Max is a better defender than Cedi Osman. If George Niang is taking 18 minutes a game, you could basically replace Lamar Stevens there. And I think he's more replacing Kevin Love. But I think on a possession-by-possession basis, he's a better defender than Kevin Love. And when you account for internal growth from the returning players as well, I don't think there's any excuses. I think this is still a team that should be a top 5 defense. And even if there's a little bit of slippage, maybe because you're not playing your starters as many minutes and there's some blowouts and you have to go to cleaning the glass to find our defensive rating in garbage time. And there we are in number 1 when it's not garbage time. Like if those type of factors are in play, I still think they should be a top 5 defense.
So I want to just continue to challenge this idea. Like they started and ended most games last season, Justin, with 2 elite rim protectors and an elite point of attack defender. We can talk all we want about Max Strus as a competent defender, a gritty defender, a guy who works hard. An elite point of attack defender, he is not. And
Agreed.
And I think what is interesting to me is I agree with you in the sense that if I'm JB Bickerstaff and the coaching staff, I am still hammering that we are a defensive team, that we win with defense, and that's how our bread is buttered.
Yep.
However, if our closing 5 does not, in our opening 5, does not include Isaac Okoro, I think it's going to be a bit more of a balanced attack this year where I think there is going to be some slippage against the best teams in the tensest moments when you're putting our best 5 against your best 5. Our best 5 against your best 5 is a lot of where your team's identity lies.
Yeah.
And I just don't think they're going to be able to count on smothering teams like they did in a lot of their games down the stretch. Or to make comebacks. I think it's going to have to be a more balanced attack. So while I think as a coaching staff, I'm still pushing defensive team, and that's what I'm spending a ton of time working on in camp and in practice over the course of the year and what I'm preaching. I do think their offense is going to have to be a legitimate, a legitimate unit because I do think they traded off a little bit in terms of the
Yeah.
personnel they added. We're going to
No,
see a lot of Max Strus at the 4.
We probably are. He played about 28% of his minutes at power forward for Miami, and Bam is a fully matured man. Even though he's undersized from a height perspective, he's strong, right? It's kind of similar to Dwight Howard in that way. But it's funny looking at just the wide range of positions that Max Strus defended last year. He spent 17% of his minutes guarding point guards, 26% on shooting guards, 23% on small forwards, 23% on power forwards, and he defended centers 12% of the time last year. I was looking at the matchups throughout the playoffs last year. The Bucks series, the guy he spent the most minutes on was Grayson Allen. Second was Brook Lopez. And then Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton. Next series was Josh Hart and Grimes, Derek White and Marcus Smart in the Boston series. Like it is a wide range of guys, but I do think that it's going to be interesting to see. Cavs are going to have to defend teams more straight up. Garland's going to need to defend point guards. Mitchell's going to need to be a more consistent contributor on the defensive end, because I think we saw, kind of high watermarks and high flashes from him defensively last year. I think he was a lot better than Utah, but there were still times where that effort lapsed. I think in the playoffs, his defensive impact wasn't as high as it could be. So he's going to need to do a better job. So I get where you're coming from. I think it's going to be a major question. But my question for you is, what do you think the role should be for Isaac Okoro? Like how much should he be in this rotation? And like I've heard people kind of almost talk about him as an afterthought, and I'm still of the opinion that he needs to be a priority in this rotation. And just because he may be moving to the bench, and I'd say likely is moving to the bench, I don't think that means his development should be neglected, nor should his minutes.
I think the minutes are just going to go down by pure, like just getting boxed out, like it's just a lot of mouths to feed, especially if and a lot of it does continue to go back to, is Ricky Rubio in the rotation? Is he with the team? Is Ty Jerome in the rotation? It gets it gets a lot easier to find him minutes, even as the 7th man. If you're not playing a backup point guard, because you can find him a lot more minutes at the 2, while Karras or Donovan are finding minutes at the 1. You can find him minutes at the 3, while Darius and Karras are at the 1 and the 2. Like it's a lot easier to find lineup combinations that have room for Isaac, and I do think a lot of it is going to be kind of on Isaac. Because if he's making threes at a decent clip, at a decent volume, it's going to be hard for JB to take him off the floor. Because he just provides, you look at your role players, and typically you either want them to plug in seamlessly and just let you do what you were doing, but with different players, kind of rotating in, or you want them to bring a skill that you do not have otherwise. Mm-hmm. I think Isaac clearly falls in the latter camp there, in the sense that they just don't have anyone at the point of attack like him, especially for small guards that he can really hound. So I think he's going to have plenty of opportunities, but on nights where he's not being guarded, I just do think there's going to be times where JB goes, man, Karras is just getting all those minutes. Or hey, we're playing George at the 3, and George is hitting his shots. He's moving well. We want to be a little bigger. That's one thing George Niang gives you if you want to play at him at the 3 is, he is a slightly undersized 4, but he's got really good size for the 3. And, if you want to replicate like some of the Lowry at the 3 or Dean at the 3 stuff, I think he can do that a little bit on defense, just by being big enough and, moving some bodies out of the way. So, like, I think it's just going to be, there are going to be more games where Isaac is not a factor. I think on his best games, he'll play as much as he did last year, but there will be times where the game plan or the opponent or Isaac's own play just kind of push him out. And he gets that early shift, and it doesn't go well, and JB goes, it's not your night, buddy. So like I just think I would like to see him deployed as that specialist, as the this guy's cooking us. Isaac, go shut his water off. Yeah, and see how, and then also in the early season, just see how he pairs with this extra shooting, because I do think he has had such a burden, often being relied to be the second or third best shooter on the floor in a lot of these lineup configurations. I'm excited to see what he looks like as the fourth best shooter on the floor, and what that does for him in terms of his space to cut and be a finisher. Where I thought he grew a lot in that area last year.
I agree. I think if you are correct, where he's going to get pushed out, there's just not an ability to make it work offensively with him on the court. I think that's a problem.
Hold on. Let me.
Okay.
I want to challenge that framing. There will be nights where the other players that play in his position group are just more helpful. It's not that the offense won't be able to hang. It's that, hey, Karras is cooking and we need that extra playmaking. Or, hey, they are selling out on Darius and Donnie on ball. We need a spacer out there. I don't think it'll be that. Isaac is failing. Just because this team is now talented enough that there will be nights where role players play 12 minutes, and it's not because they messed up. I think that's important for us to start prepping our brains for.
I think you're right. Like if you are setting the floor, like I would say he needs to be playing 15, 16 minutes a night, and you're in that range of 16 to 26 minutes based on matchup, based how you're performing. Because like you said, we brought in players that address that bring skill sets that we didn't have in the past, that allows the Cavs to play in different ways where they didn't really have that option in the past. But Isaac also brings something that you absolutely need to have. And if you're having trouble, keeping him on the court, that's a skill set you need to address, right? Like you might have to go out in that instance and bring in someone that brings that to the table, because if you don't have that kind of point of attack defender in the playoffs, you're going to have some issues. Now, I think the one thing that kind of goes in the Cavs' favor that doesn't get talked about enough is when it comes to guards in the Eastern Conference, there's not a lot that are going to kill you. Like there's not a lot of premier point of attack going to really hurt you guards. Like even Jalen Brunson, who had a good series against the Cavs, we've talked about it before. He was very inefficient throughout that series, and I think you could have handled that better in terms of how you defended him and not jeopardize the defense in the same ways. But I don't think he's going to win you a series necessarily. Tyrese Halliburton probably isn't in that kind of a situation. I'm not worried about Derek White. I'm not worried about Drew Holiday cooking us for 40, right? Tyrese Maxey is a nice player, but I don't think he's.
Don't you dare tempt those gods. That man has killed us.
He has killed us. So I'm worried about it, but I don't think he's going to win a playoff series single handedly. Is what I'm trying to say. But even so, like you need to have that guy that can sub into the rotation. You need to find ways to make Isaac Okoro work offensively, because if you have an injury to Max Strus, he's been a very durable player. But what the hell are you going to do? Are we going to sit here and say, well, we had an injury to Strus and, the same problems came up with Okoro? No, you have to invest time throughout the regular season in making it work with Isaac Okoro, in expanding how you're using him. And obviously some of that comes down to him. Some of that also has to come down to the guys on the court, finding him and trusting him and saying we're making a conscious investment. Some comes down to the coaching staff to get him more opportunities in more creative ways. But I do think that he needs to be a staple in the rotation, because he brings a skill set that is essential to playoff success. And that has to be in the back of our minds throughout the season, that we are invested in trying to develop skill sets that we're going to be able to utilize in the playoffs. And I there's been a lot of Okoro discussion recently. Dunked on Sam Vecini on Game Theory talked about it. Him being possibly extension eligible, and I thought those were good, nuanced conversations on those podcasts. And they're honestly they were a lot higher on him than even a lot of the Cavs fans that we talked to. of being a guy that they could see kind of extending and signing to that kind of Jared Vanderbilt extension if that is available. But like that's I just think that he's a valuable player and he's someone that the team should be invested in. And like when it comes to minutes, it gets weird because when we talk right now,
zero-sum game, baby.
It's not though, because when we talk now, it's fully healthy rosters. We're not factoring in, okay, some nights you play a little more, some nights you don't. Like as much as we brought in talent, we didn't bring in guys that are so talented that Isaac Okoro can't go out there and take their minutes if he's playing well. Like if he improves, that he's not going to be able to do it. If I'm looking at the Cavs last year, Carter, guys that played at least 40 games for them last season, here's their minutes per game. Obviously, Donovan, Darius, Mobley, and Allen, I'm excluding them, but Jetty played 20, Okoro played 22, Karras played 30, Dean played 20, Kevin Love played 20, and Lamar played 18. That's over 40 games. That's over half the season, right? So if I'm taking those Jetty 20 and I'm moving that up to 28, I can still keep Okoro at 22, in my opinion. Like, I think that has to be the bare minimum. And I think investing in him and trying to get more meat off of that bone has to be a priority for the team. I think it's really, really damn important.
I have a question for you then.
Okay, go ahead.
One of the reasons those guys all played those level of minutes is our boy JB Bickerstaff really preferred an 8-man rotation when the game was close. Just due to where the roster was. The easiest road to getting a guy like Isaac 20 plus minutes is not to play a ninth guy like a Dean Wade or a Ricky Rubio or a Ty Jerome. Would you run an 8-man rotation in the regular season?
Some nights. Like, I think some nights you're going to go deeper. Some nights, if we're playing Milwaukee, I'm going 8. I want the team to be ready to play that rotation against top competition. And that has to come with the balance of, in other matchups, we're going to go a little deeper strategically. We're going to give guys other looks. Let's say, Karras misses some time because he does get banged up every now and then. You go a little deeper. You have Dean Wade. Maybe you even call up Bates later in the season because you just want to give him some looks within the context of the team, right? Like or that's a Ty Jerome game where he's playing. I think you want to have your 9-10 guy for certain matchups where they're part of the rotation. They're being factored in, not just, hey, we're up by a lot, so we're giving you a look. I think on those nights, you want to go a little deeper. And against the top competition, you're going that way. Like, you're going to need to play your guys a lot of minutes because most stars, like, as much as people look at, like, Donovan playing like 35 minutes a game, that's a lot less than a lot of other stars in the league. And you're at a competitive disadvantage if you're playing your starters 5-6 minutes fewer in that game than the other team stars.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's where I think depth and fit will, hopefully carry the day. I'm not sure I'm ready to say an 8-man rotation. I really want to make sure this team is rested and fresh for the playoffs. And so if you are playing 8, I want our stars to be really well balanced I want those minutes to actually be pretty evenly distributed among those 8. But I also, like, as much as, you want to make sure a guy like Isaac gets reps, I want to make sure a guy like Dean gets reps. Like Dean is in my opening night rotation if he's healthy. He's at the very end. He's at the very end of it. He's my 9th man. But I want to see, like, whether he can kind of bounce back after the injury last season, capitalize on some of that momentum he was really developing. Where, I mean, remember that first month, Justin, where the jumper was looking reworked, and he was
our Grant Williams.
Yeah, he was playing like Grant Williams level basketball. He was doing he was really awesome for us. So, I feel like I just feel like there is probably 1 or 2 players on this Cavs roster that are, while they're healthy, obviously, because to your point, people always get hurt. It's going to be so weird not all of a sudden seeing Jetty playing 30 minutes in, like, January. It's going to be so different not having that person to turn to. But while this team is healthy...
It's going to be weird, like, prolonged stretches, because, once every 4 games, sometimes he won't play. But, a prolonged stretch of Jetty not playing will be different.
Yes. So, like, I think... while this team is healthy, there are going to be guys who are like, man, I need more run than this to prove myself. And like that's I said it last year, and I'll say it every year. This team keeps getting better. Is like that is the tax of being a good team. Is sometimes you're a good player that just isn't getting a lot of run.
Yeah.
And
I guess my thing is still like, even if you are going deeper, like I really do feel like Isaac needs to be prioritized, because I just think that's a skill set you're going to need one way or another, and developing it in house is going to be cheaper and easier than going out and acquiring it.
Justin, I hear that and I agree with that, but I think you're slightly underrating like the idea of like, hey, George, I know we paid you a good chunk of our off season. We told you how much how excited we were for you.
I don't think he cuts into his 18. I don't think he cuts it. Like,
you're only playing 12
playing him
tonight.
a lot more?
Whatever it is. Like,
yeah.
Justin, when the game is close, minutes pare down. Like on the nights where Darius, Donnie, Evan, and Jared are all playing 36, 37, 38 minutes, because that's what great players do. And you're in a close game, you're in a dogfight that maybe you didn't even think you were going to be. It was against like the Magic or something. You thought you might be able to build a lead, but you didn't. And now it's the fourth quarter, and George has only played 11 minutes, and you don't want you've committed to your rotation. Like I feel like you got to remember,
I'm fine with that.
This is the zero sum game that I'm talking about. Is that at some point you're going to you got to choose who you're going to bum out. Because whoever it is going to be bummed out in those moments. And like, so like, I just think that's where the meritocracy of who's playing the best and the evaluation of the prospects and the team and how you think they need to work in the playoffs, that's where they're going to kind of mesh. The dream is that the players you think you need in the postseason and the players that are playing the best are the same.
Yeah,
it gets way challenging when it's not.
That doesn't happen unless in those other games. Like, I get that you're going to get into those crunches in those kind of premier matchups where now all the stars are going to be playing because there's a policy in place. But you're only going to be comfortable with Isaac in those minutes if you make more of the other minutes out there. And I just think there's a missed opportunity. And some of this comes down to him being in that starting lineup, right? Like you said, him being the third best shooter in a lineup, him being forced to be in the corner in those starting lineups, I think that made things tougher for him. But even still, I think the usage was too low. I looked it up. There's 222 players that played at least 20 minutes per game. Only 9 had a lower usage rate than Okoro. It was Nick Batum, Alex Caruso, which surprised the hell out of me, Kevon Looney, Mitch Robinson, Conchar, Dean Wade, shout out Dean, Reggie Bullock, and PJ Tucker. And for players that had at least 1,500 touches last year.
1,500 minutes.
What's that?
1,500 minutes, right?
1,500 minutes. Yeah, that's right. Isaac had the fewest touches in those minutes. And I looked it up, Carter, because, one of the things you hear is, he's getting touches and he's turning down shots. If you look at field goal percent or field goal attempts per touch, Isaac was actually third on the team behind Donovan Mitchell and Jetty Osman. He took a shot on 24% of his possessions. And, 16% of those possessions were assists and defensive rebounds, right? So he's someone that's out there, when he gets those shots, he's taking the shots. He's being aggressive. And I think it's on the guards, I think it's on the coaching staff to get him more of those touches in those instances, because he is someone that's assertive. And I think, you look at it, and like Lamar Stevens averaged more touches per minute when he's out there on the court last year.
I wonder why, Justin.
It's not because he's taking more attempts of when he's out there per touch, right? Like, it's lower, but I do think it was a product. Like, he averaged 1.15 touches per minute. Isaac was 0.9. So not a massive difference, but, over a 20-minute game, that's a decent number of touches. I think my theory here, Carter, is that was a product of him playing with the second unit when there was only one big on the floor, where his slashing ability, his ability to get open was more clear. And when you look at Lamar, like, part of the reason Isaac moved in the starting lineup was because that starting lineup struggled and Lamar struggled. When he was a starter, he had a true shooting percentage of 49. When he was a reserve, it was 56. Isaac didn't have that problem. He had a true shooting percentage of 62 when he was a starter, and it got better every single month. He was up to 69% before he eventually got hurt, playing through it in March. It came down to 63 and then obviously missed April. But, like Isaac played well with that starting lineup, and I think there's going to be more opportunities with him in the second unit. And I think those opportunities can't be wasted. We have to be more creative in getting him touches and exploring what we have with Okoro. And this gets me back to kind of the big question, which is, listening to those podcasts discussing whether or not, the Cavs may go out and extend Isaac Okoro. Would you be comfortable giving him an extension similar to the Jared Vanderbilt one, which was reported for 48, so about, the mid-level exception? Would you be comfortable with that kind of deal at this point?
At this point, yeah, of course. I mean, but again, I kind of go back to the larger cap machinations here. I'm not letting matching salary walk out the door. I'm not letting young prospects walk out the door. I think I am objectively lower than you with Isaac on the offensive end. I think his lack of involvement in the offense is. I will say I was mostly I was kind of. How you do when you're arguing with someone. I was thinking of counters while you were kind of making some of these points. I think your best point was that Lamar got to play with the second unit, where you're going to have, when you're playing with bench units, you're going to have more plays short circuit and say, I got this. I do think there is a personality component there, that Lamar is comfortable asking for the ball and was comfortable asking for the ball and attacking. Yeah. I wasn't always thrilled with how it went, but he was comfortable doing that. I think, we always talk about their roles in college, where Lamar was the best offensive player on a Penn State team, and Isaac was kind of who he was, who he is now when he was at Auburn. In terms of like being a defensive specialist, that was not the lead on ball creator. So I do think there is some truth to, I want to see how Isaac operates when they are down to their third or fourth ball handlers, and that third or fourth ball handler gets trapped, and Isaac's the release valve, and how does he attack with a better spaced floor? I really want to see if you're talking about the two, the biggest names addition of Niang and Strus, I want to see him play a lot of minutes with those guys. When they're both on the floor, I kind of want to see Isaac out there as much as we can. Just kind of
one guard, one big, and Isaac with Levert, Strus, Niang, like two of those three. Those are lineups I'm really
interested in. Or all three,
in.
And the Cavs can play six guys. I think that would be a really revolutionary tactic.
You know what? The refs miss a lot of things these days, especially if they're learning from FIBA. You might be able to sneak another guy out there and get a power play going.
Absolutely, buddy. So, I think I am excited to see kind of what he does this year. But a Vando level extension I think is pretty appropriate, especially given that he's a great culture guy for you. Well liked in the locker room. Again, brings a skill you don't have otherwise. And again, I don't want this team to be in the business of letting assets walk out the door. And even if his long-term future doesn't end up in Cleveland, I think that this season's going to be a big make or break on kind of what that means for him. But again, I feel like this is where we have to do the spiel where, like, whatever numbers, if they do end up, coming to terms with him, whatever the number is, it's gonna surprise you. And that's the way contracts are going to be for a while.
They were talking like 15 a year, and like it's
no surprise that the Cap Space podcast is the one actually being pretty reasonable about like where these role player numbers are going. You have to remember, guys, max contracts are $60 million a year now. And like, so when you consider that 15 may sound shocking, but or 12 or whatever might sound shocking, but it really just isn't. And
that's where Vicini was at too. It was like around the mid-level, because you have to remember, like, the mid-level is going to rise to the point where like midway through Max Strus's deal, that's going to be considered kind of that mid-level amount, right? So to me, I feel like I did, and maybe this is muscle memory. I feel like I did it in the fall of 2014 when I was saying sign Tristan to an extension. Like he brings a valuable skill set on defense. You're going to need this in the playoffs. Lock him up now.
Tristan also just won you a title. So
no, he hadn't at that point. The Tristan extension came after.
It was the year.
Tristan extension came after the 2015 finals.
You're right. Sorry.
Yeah. So, he obviously proved himself in that playoff round and was very valuable then. But at the time, it was, Tristan he can't even dunk with one hand. Why are we going to pay him? And, they ended up extending Varejao instead. And the Cavs obviously are going to have more information than us on this too, right? Like they're going to know how Isaac looked in summer workouts. They're going to look at how he looked in training camp. They're going to look at how he looks in preseason, right? Much, much more information. And Isaac might not want to do that, right? Like this goes back to us rooting for players to get the best for themselves, right? Like if he feels, hey, I've put this all together, I'm taking a leap. I'm 22 years old, same age as Mobley here. Like, I think that I can do more and I can get up to like that 18 range even, right? By all means, bet on yourself. But I think if you can find a valuable deal, lock him in here. I would be thrilled by that because I think that he's someone that's worth investing in. I think it's a skill set that's worth investing in. And like I said, when you look at how low the touches were, when you look at how low the usage was, there are guys that are less talented than him on teams that are as good as the Cavs that got more touches, that got more on ball reps, that got more looks. And I think that, as we, have him come in the second unit, as you go through blowouts, as you have injuries, all of those opportunities need to be taken advantage of to develop the talent that we have. And he can't get forgotten in that mix. He can't get forgotten in that shuffle. If you look at it as, okay, like we just have our starting five, that's not the way it plays out. Guys get much more minutes than that throughout the flow of a season. And if we don't develop that in the regular season, it's going to cost us in the playoffs because this is a skill set that you need in the postseason.
Absolutely, buddy. I'm excited. I'm excited to see him take the opportunity. And the one thing I'll continue to say that like I just don't want to get lost in this is like Isaac has to grab the opportunities that are in front of him.
100%.
Like, you can't, and I think same thing goes for a guy like Dean, who has less pedigree, less like long-term investment from the franchise, at least over the last couple years. But like, hey, Dean, if Jarrett gets banged up or Mobley gets banged up and you become a spot starter, you gotta earn your keep. You gotta show it. And like the nice thing is with this team is they are now at the point with their depth that I don't think they're no longer relying on all of these guys who are like, maybe they'll hit, maybe they won't. Like, they don't need a 100% hit rate because their talent level is high enough at the top and their depth at that, 5 through 10 is good enough that you go like, okay, yeah, as long as we get like, remember in the postseason last year, we're like, man, if we can just get 7 guys JB can count on in the postseason, then we're geeked. And we didn't get there. We didn't get to 7. I really want to, and I really am quite confident that we have that number now, and that means that I think this team has no less than 10 guys that if they play in the regular season, I'm feeling pretty good about it. And really maybe even more. And so I only need to that point of looking towards the postseason, looking towards this team kind of reaching their ceiling. I only need 8 of those 10 or 11 to be able to hold up. So like I feel like at that point you're kind of playing a numbers game. Obviously the Cavs front office and coaching staff isn't going to look at it that way. They're not pulling slots at a casino in Vegas. But like I think it's close enough that like you have a really good shot to find your 8 or 9 guys you can go to war with in any given playoff series.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's going to be healthy competition for minutes. Like these guys are going to have to seize that opportunity. Like that's the number. Like, it's applicable for Isaac, but one of the number one things you learn playing basketball when you're playing off ball is like movement and looking like you want the ball is the best way to get the attention of a playmaker, right? Like if you're just kind of standing there and you don't look like you want the ball, you're not going to get the ball. So Isaac's going to need to go out there and make the most of those opportunities. And if these guys don't make the most of those opportunities, that's be a conversation we'll need to have at the deadline, because those are skill sets that are needed. And like I said, the easiest way to go about it is internally. I'm getting excited to see this. I'm getting excited to see how it looks. I can't wait for, the camp buzz of who's looking good, who's standing out, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to media day.
To the land.
Looking forward to media day. We might have a little surprise for listeners of the podcast there. So excited for that as well. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chasedown's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. And until next time, go Cavs.
Clear.